In this series, I've partnered with SEIB Insurance Brokers to give you everything you need to know. Over the course of 3 episodes, we chart the hypothetical year of a first-time horse owner like myself, taking you from buying and insuring your first horse to accidents, claims and rehabbing, and finally to insurance, premiums and renewals. This is essentially everything that I wish I'd been told before I became a horse owner, and I'm really excited to be partnering with the experts to share it with you. This is episode 2. Accidents, claims, and rehabbing. Okay, Steph, I've bought my horse, I'm happy as Larry, I've got my insurance, everything's dandy. I come up to the yard one day and my horse has come in lame. What do I do next?
First of all, you would need to phone your vet to have an initial look at your horse. It's also important to give us a call as soon as possible so that we can guide you through the claims process, advise you of any diagnostic procedures that might be quite costly and would need our prior consent. An example of that would be an MRI scan, commonly used to diagnose lameness.
Yeah.
They can cost sort of £1,500 upwards, so it's something that you need to look into whether we would cover those costs for that and what we would need from you and your vet in order to cover those costs.
This takes us into why somebody might actually want to make a claim in the first place. Often you'll have a lameness but you won't necessarily know what's been causing it, and before you can even get to say an MRI, your vet might say, well actually if you want to take this to your insurance, what we need to do first is a lameness workup. They might want to do some nerve blocks, and by the time you get to the MRI you've spent at least £1,000, £2,000. Does that feel true in terms of the way that things need to happen before you can get to certain other diagnostic moments?
I mean, even just diagnosing a lameness can take sort of 6 months maybe, sometimes even longer.
How does it work when continual diagnostic tests are being added to a claim?
I think it's important for people to keep regular communication with your insurance broker or provider, because as time goes on we may need additional veterinary reports, just sort of with an update of where the horse is at, the response to treatment so far, what they would need to do next. Also gives sort of estimate of costs so that we know where we're at, and it also keeps our clients in the loop with costings of the claims so far.
And speaking of that, I guess, how does it work in terms of actually paying for all of this stuff? Am I paying for it and then I send it all to you and you decide we can pay for this and this, but we can't pay for this reason? Or is it something that can be sent straight to my vet, for example?
Yeah, so if the claim is accepted under the policy terms for your specific cover, we can pay the vets directly or we can reimburse yourself. The important thing is whatever's easiest and best for you. We understand this is a really stressful time for a horse owner. It can be very emotional. The last thing you need to be worrying about is paying a big vet bill and then trying to claim it back.
Let's talk time frames. Obviously these things can go on for a really long time, but I know that coming up to a year is a really important time to consider where your claim has got to. So say my horse is lame in March, I put in a claim and we've been working through lots and lots of veterinary things all the way up until the next March. What happens when we hit that year date?
Yes, so unfortunately insurance can't cover problems forever. So there are time limits on claims. We have a time limit of 12 months from when the symptoms were first noticed, or until your maximum amount is claimed before that. So as we spoke earlier about different levels of vet fee cover, for example, if you had 5,000 vet fee cover per claim, you could potentially claim for 12 months from that March when the horse's symptoms were first noticed, or until you've claimed the £5,000 for your cover. When that time frame comes to an end, it would be a case of us reviewing all of the information that's happened, everything that's happened within that 12-month claim period, and we would certainly take all of that into consideration when preparing your renewal when that becomes due.
Speaking of payments, talk to us about excess. What does it mean and why is it so important that it is a key consideration when we take out a policy?
Yep, so the excess would be what you pay in the event of a claim. So if your claim is covered under your insurance policy, that would be the amount of money that you would be paying. It's really important when you take out the insurance to make sure your excess isn't too high, for example. So it needs to be a realistic figure to find in the event of your horse becoming ill and you having to get the vet out and subsequently making a claim. But excesses can also save you money on your insurance premium. Yeah. So if you had a higher excess, that will naturally reduce your insurance premium. Yeah. At SEIB, as well as an excess, we do offer a percentage excess as well. So you'd pay the initial excess when the claim is first settled, and then as the claim goes along, you then pay a percentage of those costs. It makes it more manageable as the claim goes along, but by having that percentage excess, it does save you money on your premium as well.
As a simple example of how excess works, let's say that you got a vet bill worth £700. Of this vet bill, you would need to pay the excess. The amount of excess is set by you and is something you need to pay on every claim. In this example, I've said that the excess is £200. If this vet bill claim is accepted by your insurance, they will pay whatever is left over. So in this case, it would be £700, take away £200, leaving £500 to be covered by the insurance, up to the amount of vet fee cover listed on your policy, which is usually between £3,500 and £5,000. Okay, Steph, we're going to move on to the slightly awkward part, which is why insurance companies get a bad reputation in the first place, which is claim refusals, which of course means that if an insurance company were to refuse your claim, any treatment, any veterinary costs or anything that you have added up in terms of money to be spent wouldn't be paid by the insurance company and would need to be picked up by the horse owner themselves. So why might a claim be refused?
A couple of examples where claims may be refused would be if you had cover in place for accidents and external injuries only, for example. So you'd have cover in place for a visible wound, say if your horse got kicked, but you wouldn't have the cover in place if you tried to submit a claim for a respiratory disease, for example, because you just simply don't have the cover there. Another example would be if there was an exclusion in place on your policy that would prevent you being able to claim for that condition.
We often hear stories, particularly on social media, of claims that have been refused on a technicality. So you said the problem started on this date, but your physio is saying it started on this date. So what can we do when we're filling out a claim form to give ourselves the best chance of actually getting the claim put through and accepted?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep a note of dates. So, you went down the yard on the 10th of March, noticed the horse wasn't quite right, might have waited a few days to phone the vet, for example, and by the time you'd phoned us, got your claim form, can't remember that date when the horse was first not quite right. It's always a good idea to keep things written down, and also, as we touched on earlier, it's really important to let us know as soon as possible, because we would then note that on your file, that you advised us on this date, something isn't quite right, not sure if it's going to need further investigation or not. So between us, we can then keep an accurate log of when that problem first started.
In the third and final episode of this series, we'll be looking at what happens when you hit your first year of horse insurance with premiums and renewals. Stay tuned for that. If you have any other questions on horse insurance, trailer or horsebox insurance, freelance insurance or any other equine related insurance questions, head to seib.co.uk. The link is in the description. Speaking of, what are we speaking of?
Yes.
Yeah. 1, 2.
Is there anything, actually no. We sometimes hear, oh my god. Alright Steph, we're going to move on to the slightly awkward part, which is why insurance companies get a bad reputation, which is of course when when policies are refused. When claims get refused, so which of course means, oh, I've said of course like 50 times, let's start that again.
I hate this bit. This isn't the bit of filming where it could go one way or the other way.
The cover for...
Let's start that section again, shall we?
Insurance. Can't see you in that one.
That's fine, because that's your... It's all you, boo.
Oh.